Coming up next on Blast in the Past is Stewie Kemperman. Stewie, from my time down here, he was one of the younger guys that come in. Lovely fellow Stewie. He'd always up for a chat, and the first thing I picked up about Stewie is his kicking ability, his skills, and his work rate. He'd always be at training, doing what he needs to do to improve. But with his left foot on him and running out of the defence and that kind of stuff, he was a big asset to the side. He played a lot of ones footy, and even as a young fella, he held his own around the club, which was great. Not just on the field, off the field as well. Mad Mondays and footy trips and that kind of stuff. Stewie will always be in there, enjoying the club as it was, a club, I suppose, enjoying the club atmosphere. He's pretty handy to have to play next to as well. You'd always pop up and you'd always see Stewie pop around the back for that cheeky little handball. When I've been smashed on the ground, Stewie's always there for the little handball around the back, which I was fine with because he could kick your footy. He was a good asset for the club, and part of that younger brigade with the rigger, with Rig and Brett Dorr and Burnsy and Byron Barry. They really made up a good part of our side, which was good, and for him to play some really good footy at that level, early on, was a great achievement for him. From there, I think he's gone up and captained a Noble Park side to a premiership, which I see, and I have no doubt that the grounding from here has helped him go along and do all that and achieve those things from that regard. So, he was good value, Stewie, and a good player to have, and a good person to have around the club.
I played all my junior footy at Berwick Footy Club. That progressed through to the senior club as I got into my teenage years. I played a few under 18 years there and then a few senior games before I started playing with the Stingrays and getting into that program as a bottom age player and then as a top age player. From there I went to Frankston, again wanting to play at the highest level that I possibly could, but also be rewarded with an opportunity. If you're putting in the effort, I felt that there was more opportunity to get a senior game playing at Frankston than there would be at, say, an aligned club. And that was in 2003, which also coincided with me changing over to my home club to Beaconsfield. And the reason for doing that was a lot of my friends had done the same thing and moved from Berwick to Beaconsfield, and a lot of my schoolmates were already playing at Beaconsfield, so I just wanted to have that connection there. And as it so turned out that I ended up breaking my ankle just over midway through the 2003 season at Frankston, and I was able to go back and play with Beaconsfield, qualify for the finals, and play in a premiership, which I'm very thankful for. And how that all worked out, I was very lucky. Put it that way, I was very lucky. The next 3 years I came back and played at Frankston again through to 2006. Which coincided with my studies. Once I finished my degree, I always knew that as a footballer at this level, I needed to be able to train and be committed to training as much as I could. And going into the workforce as a teacher, I knew that I wouldn't be able to make that commitment. So it was from there that I made my decision. Certainly have no regrets over that, but been in contact with Shane Bergman, who was a former player at Frankston as well and was coaching at Noble Park at the time, and there was a few other players that had moved on to Noble Park from Frankston, so the connection was there. I ended up going in and playing my first season at Noble Park in 2007, and I'm still there to this day. As a footballer, I'm probably considered a running type, outside player. I think over the years, and particularly playing under Brett, I had to develop that inside part of my game. So I think I'm certainly a lot more balanced than what I once was. But I think people that would describe me as a footballer would certainly reference the skills, ability to read the game, and you know, running and kicking the footy long. So I think that's probably my biggest strength, in that I do think I read the footy pretty well, play a lot of my footy across half back, and then once I have got the footy, and I'm able to spread from the back line, using the footy well, and placing a really high price on the possession that we have. And I certainly think it's pretty simple, but if we've got the footy, they can't score, so certainly take as much care as I can with the footy when I get it, so that we don't turn it over and give them an opportunity to score. Look, the coaches I've had over my whole career have certainly contributed to shaping me as a footballer and as a person, and Brett Lovett was no different. He was probably the perfect coach for me at that time of my football career. I'd come out of the under-18 system and certainly been, to a degree, babied a bit. Coming to Frankston, it was all of a sudden playing with the men, and Lovey was a great leader of men, and one that was really passionate about the footy club, but also passionate about developing the individual as a player and a person. And it was no different with me as well. He certainly pushed me to my limits, and certainly developed the mental side of my game. Certainly he scaffolded what needed to happen to be a senior player, and to be a good senior player that was a consistent contributor. And I think all facets of my game developed under Lovey because of that. He wasn't one to sort of mince words. He didn't use many in a day, but his feedback was really formative. Whether you liked it or not, it was accurate, and it always provided you with what you needed to do to go to that next level, or to appease the grievances he had. So for me, at that time in my career, I think I couldn't have asked for a better coach at the time, and certainly a lot of the values he instilled in me back then, I certainly hold true today, and try and hold the younger guys of today's generation accountable to. Well, the memories I have playing at Frankston are probably twofold. Firstly, the playing side of things. You certainly remember your first game. My first game was against Box Hill, round 1, 2003. I played on Richie Vandenberg down here at Frankston Park. The ground was packed. It was an enormous crowd. There was a big buzz around. There'd been a big recruitment drive, and a lot of local players had come to the club, and coming off a disappointing year the year before, I think the whole community got behind us and showed up that day, and thankfully we showed up as well, and we played some really good footy, and we got away with a win, and the atmosphere at the end of the game, and in the change rooms and the social club, it was electric and addictive, and it was a fantastic memory that I have from the club. Certainly playing finals, we were unlucky to miss the finals the first year. I think we missed out by a kick, and then I think we were a bit off in the second year. But the third year I was here, we played finals. We were over in Tassie, playing in front of a packed Bellerive Oval. I think an interesting situation where we actually finished above them on the ladder, but we had to play them at home. We went over there, and unfortunately we got beaten. But again, sort of having something to show for all the hard work we put in over the previous 3 years, that we had actually risen up and were a finals contender, was great. The year after, we made the finals again. We actually won a final, and then we missed out the week after. But certainly there's some of the memories as a player that I take away from playing at Frankston. The other side of it was probably the social side, and we played a lot of Sunday games, so we didn't get many chances to get out and socialise together. But when we did, we certainly had a lot of fun, and the mid-year balls and the functions in and around Frankston were really special, as they were really well attended by everyone, and everyone's families, and that sort of got involved as well, which was great. One memory that does stand out, and this was probably a big eye-opener for me as a young player coming in my first year, we'd played a TV game against Tasmania on the Saturday, and we played this big midgie ball. I think it was at the racecourse that night, so we're all a bit excited about that. Unfortunately, we went out and we probably embarrassed ourselves a bit on the tally in front of everyone, and we lost the game. And Lovey was furious. So after the game, we're all sort of a bit disappointed, but also slightly thinking about the night ahead, and we'll have some fun tonight, and we'll work hard next week and get ourselves back on track. Lovey had other ideas. He decided to call a 6 a.m. training session the next morning at Frankston, and that certainly put a dampener on the night for me, but for some, they didn't really let it bother them in their nights. It continued on, and I remember arriving at Frankston and at whatever 5:50 and whatever it was, and blokes are rocking up in taxis and sort of just rolling into the club, and we got in here, and I think we had to do 100 hundreds or something like that, and then we went home. But it was certainly a memory I'll never forget, and a big wake-up call from a junior player going into a senior competition, that they can do those sorts of things and they're not enjoyable. So lesson learned: when there's a TV game, make sure you perform. Coming into the rooms today, it's been a while since I've been in the rooms, and the layout has changed a little bit. The lockers are usually on the other side, and now sitting where the old gym used to be, and just the memories of looking around at the numbers and looking at the players' names on the lockers that I played with, and realising when you see a lot of the players that have played milestone games around the room, I was very fortunate enough to play with. So probably just in reflection makes me feel very privileged to have been around the club at that time when we were so-called rebuilding, but also experiencing some success at the same time. Yeah, the change room, some people just say it's four walls, but it's certainly it's an intimate place where the relationships between players is built, and the banter, and even though it's pretty hard to get a word in sometimes with Winnow and Paddy and Benny Cat at times chiming in, it was pretty hard to get a word in, but the banter and those that 10 or 15 minutes after a really hard fought win, where you're sort of sitting around, you're all icing up, and you're just having that chat with your teammate. That's certainly what some of the memories that are coming back to me now, and certainly some I hope I never forget. Look, over the time playing at Frankston, I was very fortunate to play with a number of good players and players that I learned a lot of in terms of what it took to be a good footballer at this level, but also some good values to take away for everyday life. When I first arrived, Big Normie was sort of the father figure and the spiritual leader of the club. He certainly got around all the young boys and made sure that we felt welcome. But also then, watching him play, he's this enormous unit. Fantastic tap ruckman, but also very skillful as well, and took some big grabs and could always be relied upon to kick a goal when we needed. So he was certainly one that stood out to me as a super player. Mickey Ablett was one that I just had an enormous amount of respect for in terms of how he went about his football. As a footballer, he was just a terrific communicator. He was a terrific leader, very skillful, very passionate about the sport, and he's since gone on to have a role and a career within the sport, so which doesn't surprise me at all. But he was certainly another one I looked up to as a player. He was fantastic. And then you sort of got those guys that, the obvious ones that went on and got drafted. One that stood out to me was Marcus Mugliani, because when he got here, he was pretty raw, and he was a good player. But the transformation that he undertook over the years he was at Frankston was just phenomenal, and it ended up just coming down to how hard he worked. He just worked so hard at his body, which he was very proud of, but also the deficiencies. And I think I mentioned earlier that Lovey was really good at giving you that feedback as to what you needed to do to improve. And Rigo obviously listened to that as gospel and went away and worked on it to the nth degree. To the point where he got himself onto an AFL list and was unlucky not to remain on there, in my opinion. So he was certainly one of those players that you look back on and you think, well, that's what it really was, just how hard he worked. And I think that's a common theme for a lot of the teammates I played with, just all hard workers, and as together we were able to work towards some success. Towards the end of my career at Frankston, I suppose my role became a little more clearly defined, in that I was playing predominantly as a backman, and the opponents I played on each week were analysed and broken down for me to sort of negate. So each week I found myself lining up on players that I had an enormous amount of respect for, because there'd been a huge effort put into the analysis of them, and they'd been generally the good contributors for their team and their team's success. Some of the trickier opponents, the ones I had a lot of respect for over the years, were Ben Beams, who used to play at Tassie, along with Cameron Thurley. They were some really hard running players that were smart and would hurt you if you gave them that extra yard of space. So I always found them a great challenge to play on. Guy Ragoni was another one I played a bit of footy on late in his career, but he was certainly a hard player to play on, very smart around the contests as well. Stevie Armstrong as well was another, just a really good runner, and again, if you gave him too much space, he'd really hurt you on the scoreboard. So probably out of those guys, each week you played on some really good players, but those are the guys that remain in my memory as really tough opponents to play on. So my life after I finished playing at Frankston, I mentioned earlier that I'd finished my studies and I was entering the workforce as a teacher. So from finishing at Frankston, I started teaching at St Margaret's and Berwick Grammar Schools in Berwick, just in the junior schools there. It's certainly a passion of mine, teaching and mentoring young students, and helping them realise their potential is usually a lot greater than what they perceive their actual ability to be. So that's certainly something I'm passionate about. Currently I'm working at Caulfield Grammar School, again in the junior school. Over the past 4 or 5 years I've also completed a Masters of Education. Again, just continually looking to better myself and better understand the caper. I'll continue to do that in the foreseeable future. Certainly looking at new horizons and opportunities that are coming up through working at Caulfield, which I'm really excited about. But for now, I'll just continue to work away at that. Family-wise, I've been married, I've 2 beautiful girls at home. We've moved from living in East Bentley to out in Pakenham now, so a little bit more of a commute for me to school, but that's certainly a lot closer to my broader family and my wife's broader family as well. So life after VFL's been pretty good. Again, still playing footy at Noble Park, and we'll continue to do so for a while, but yeah, life's pretty good after VFL. The boys on the hill, they're quite unique, and certainly they lift you in games when they get tough, and when Big Normie takes a grab, or Azza would take a hanger. The boys on the hill certainly erupted, and what I think resonated with all the players was just how passionate the boys on the hill were about the footy club. They'd obviously lived through some pretty slim times, and once we started to have some success, the hill certainly grew, but there was always a set number of blokes that were there week in, week out, whether it was rain, hail or shine, and they were tremendous supporters. They were probably our loudest supporters as well, but some of my memories from the boys on the hill were they set firecrackers off in the middle of games. The drum was a constant. Some of the one-liners they used to yell out to the commentary team on the ABC coverage, they were always quite funny if you could sort of listen for them over the coverage. It was always a bit of a laugh back home, but probably the one memory I have from the hill was just some of the players they sucked in, and how they did it. And it was just bit by bit, they just get into certain players. I know Cameron Cloak was one, and Jason Caples was another, that they just, over the course of the year or a number of years, they just constantly irritate them with their thoughts, to the point where some of them were reduced to tears or felt they had to jump the fence to stand up for themselves. And you knew once that was happening that they were off their game, and it was certainly a plus for us as a team. So you could say they were like a 19th man, but they were probably more like that extra tagger that would just wear down the opposition's best players or most notable figures, because they did that so well. Yeah, so footy-wise, after I finished at Frankston, I moved over to Noble Park. And what attracted me to Noble Park, other than the connection with Bergs and a few of the other Frankston players that were there at the time, was just the professionalism they had, and that I really enjoyed the meetings and the analysis of the opposition and the analysis of your own game to get better whilst I was at Frankston. And that certainly, it didn't really deteriorate when I went to Noble Park. It was still a big focus of Bergs and the coaching committee there, and it's remained until this day. The feedback you get is really, really formative, and it allows you to work on your game. So I think that is certainly one of the reasons why I've remained at Noble Park for so long, is just that professionalism surrounding all that you do. There's certainly an expectation to win and to play finals and to be successful. I like that pressure as well. I like working in an environment where people are driven to be successful and situated in a place where there is a history of success, and where the resources to be successful are there for you as well. So I think over the years, Noble Park as a club, that's certainly what's allowed me or made me stay there for so long. The other side of it is that I've been fortunate enough to play with both of my brothers in senior teams, one of them in two premierships actually. So that's certainly, outside of winning premierships, the highlight of my footy career is running out with your brothers and playing and having success with them. Certainly very high on my agenda in the future as well. But at Noble Park, and I imagine with any club that you hang around long enough, you meet lots of people, and the longer they hang around, you get to know them on a better level, and get to know their families and their wives and their children. And over the 10 years I've been at Noble, we've had a very consistent core group of players, and we're very close friends as well. A lot of the engagements, or the 30th now, or the baby showers or baptisms, it's all the same group of players and same friendship group, and we all get along really, really well, not only with each other but with their partners, and that's certainly a big relief when you go to a club and you know your wife and your family are going to be happy being around the place as well, because they've got friendships with other wives and girlfriends and families there. So that's also a special part of Noble Park for me. And I know a lot of the players that have been at Frankston have also moved through to Noble Park as well, and over the years there's been some terrific players that have come back through the club, and Kyle Martin being one, who sort of bounced from Noble Park to Frankston into the AFL, Tory Dixon being another, and I think there's probably 9 or 10 players on our list at the moment that have had some experience at Frankston. So it's a road well travelled, and certainly one that's been equally beneficial for both parties, I think. The players that we've received from Frankston and the players that Frankston have received from Noble Park. So two very well run clubs, and two clubs I've had a lot of fun at over the years.